In this video, you're gonna learn the ins and outs of light modifiers, common terms, and by the end of the video, you'll be able to guess and understand what a light modifier is gonna do before ever purchasing it. My name is Pi, and I'm one of the founders of Lynn and Jersa Photography and SLRLounge.com. We're teaming up with Adorama to bring you a new series of photography tutorials called Master Your Craft right here on Adorama TV. So let's dive in. What's up, friends? My name is Pi. Welcome to Adorama TV. This is one of those videos that I wish existed when I first became a photographer. See, there's so many different lighting options, not only when it comes to the actual flash gear itself, but when it comes to modifiers. And I made the mistake that probably every one of us do, is I bought tons of light modifiers and I ended up not really using most of them. So what I want to do is I want to walk through kind of the different terms and show you the differences between soft versus hard light, diffused versus specular. And along the way, I'm going to give you guys a system where when you finish the video, you'll be able to understand what a light modifier is going to do essentially without ever actually purchasing it. So you can kind of just know intuitively. It's going to save you tons of money. Let me first introduce you to our subject. This is my friend Sammy. He's going to be our model today. You guys can check him out on Instagram. We will link him up in the description of the video. Now for the actual flash itself, I have here up on a stand is just the Profoto A10. Just a standard flash. I want you guys to get out of your own heads when it comes to gear. Flash, really the differences between most of them, for the most part, any of them is going to do the job. The difference is kind of in how it gets you there. I like Profoto because it's reliable and it's very simple and easy to use. But pick whatever fits the budget, use what works for you, okay? So let's start with this. Number one, soft versus hard light. See, these terms get often mixed up. We think soft and diffused are the same thing, but they're actually not. I want you to think soft versus hard. Soft lights are coming from large light sources, okay? Whereas a hard light is coming from a small light source. Let's start with just a hard light image. So up on my tripod, I have just a 100mm lens on my 5D4 and a remote that's gonna control my off-camera flash. Now, if I turn off the remote and take a shot at 1/200 of a second, f4 and ISO 100, I'm not seeing anything in this room. So all the ambient light, it's just for the video. I've knocked it all out when it comes to the photograph. So you're only seeing the flash that I'm gonna be adding to the photograph, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the flash, or at least the remote, and I'm gonna go do a little test shot. It is firing. I haven't yet adjusted power yet, so let's just do this. Let's go and make sure my white balance is set correctly. And now let's take a shot with the flash and let's see just what the brightness is at. Okay, it's pretty close. I'm gonna power up just a little bit. And Sammy, look right into the camera and you're just gonna hold that expression, just a straight face so that we don't give you like smile pains. Yes. Okay, so this is a bare flash, right? We would reference this as a hard light source. And what makes it hard when you look at the image is the hard line that you see when it transitions from highlight to shadows. So on the cheek, on his face, you can see that line. So a hard light source is any small light source, but remember, it's small in relation to the subject, right? The sun, in its physical size, is absolutely massive, but relative to where we are, it's tiny in the sky, and that makes it a hard light source. Likewise, with any flash, it's gonna be a hard light source because it's small in relation to the subject. By the way though, little side note, if you shoot macro photography, you might notice oftentimes they have these little objects, like let's say an insect or a bug, and it's being lit directly with flash, right? And they have the flash brought right up to the object. In relation to that tiny bug, the flash is actually massive. So you get a very nice soft light with that kind of a setup, despite it being a bare flash. So what I'm gonna do now is use a very basic modifier. This is just an umbrella. You can grab these for 20 bucks off of the Adorama store. You can grab them anywhere. It's just a shoot through umbrella. And what this is gonna do is it's going to open up the light source. So now we're turning a small hard light into a large soft light source. Let's see what that looks like. One little tip here, when using an umbrella, you want the umbrella to be at a decent distance from the flash, and you want the flash head set to its widest setting because you want to fill out the entire umbrella. The goal is to make it large as possible. So we're going to set that right there. I'm going to move it just a tiny bit. I don't think it's in the frame yet. Now, when we're softening a light source, we are going to lose a lot of flash power, okay? So let's take the same shot with the exact same flash power. And what you notice is it's actually quite a bit darker than that prior image, right? So we lost a good amount of light as we soften the light source. That's natural and to be expected. Anytime you diffuse a light or make it into a larger light source, it's gonna be less powerful. So what we're gonna do now is power it up. I'm gonna take it up 2 stops. 2 stops means twice the power and then twice the power again. So it's 4 times more power. Perfect. So now when you compare these two side by side, the one that we shot through the umbrella, this is now a soft light source, or at least softer compared to that first image where we had a hard light source. Now you can see that in the details by zooming in and looking at that highlight to shadow transition between both images. So watch this though. I mentioned how it's relative to your subject, right? So that means I can actually make this light source harder by bringing it away from my subject. Now in this process, we're gonna actually lose light as well, right? Because kind of light goes everywhere. We're gonna lose a lot of that light power. But what we end up getting is actually kind of a bit of a harder light. Similarly, I can make this a larger light source in relation to our subject by bringing it closer. Let's place it right here. I believe it's still gonna be out of frame. Mostly out of frame. Okay. So once we bring it closer, even though the flash is the same settings, the image is gonna be brighter. Brought further away, it's gonna be a bit darker. Okay, so now you know soft versus hard. Now let's talk about diffused versus specular. These are not the same things. Now these terms often get kind of mixed up, and we say diffused, we say specular, we say hard, I want you to separate. Soft and hard has only to do with the size of the light source in relation to your subject. Diffused versus specular has to do with kind of the quality or the specularity of the light. This is diffused. It's going through white fabric, and what this does is it kind of sends the light everywhere, okay? So if you think about it, specular is where the light is coming out straight and it's directed straight at your subject, and what you end up with is a lot of specular highlights. Essentially, these are like bright highlights on your subject, right? We already know what diffused looks like, so let's put on something specular. I'm gonna actually flip this out, and we're gonna change this to a silver-sided umbrella, okay? So that was a shoot through, this is a bounce umbrella, so what we're gonna do is actually pop this in. And then we're gonna rotate this, and we're gonna bring it kind of in close to Sammy right there. It's roughly about the same distance. Now let's take the shot again. You're gonna notice a couple different things happen with this. Okay, first, the flash is at the same power setting, but it got brighter. So a specular light source, a light source that is essentially silver, okay? The modifiers that are silver are gonna send light directly back at your subject. That generally means more light output. So if you're working outdoors and you need as much light as possible, then use something silver, use something specular, because it's gonna get you more light going directly at your subject versus diffused, right? The other thing you're gonna notice, and let me do this, let me darken this by just a little bit so we can see a little bit more. Okay. The other thing you're gonna notice is compared to the diffuse shot, even at the same brightness, you're gonna see more highlights on his skin than in the diffused image. So what's happening is any sweat, oil, anything like that on the face is essentially a bit reflective. Now, when we're shooting light directly at it, that light is gonna reflect into the camera and you're gonna get what we call specular highlights. So silver or specular modifiers are gonna give you more of these specular highlights. It's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a purpose to each of these. If I'm doing a fitness shoot and I have kind of sweaty, glistening models, I want a specular light source because it's gonna bring that out even more. So I'm often using silver-sided modifiers for that, okay? So knowing these two things now, it's possible to have a soft, specular light. That's actually exactly what this is. Soft in that it's large, and it's specular in that we're firing direct light coming off of this silver going right into his face, so we're gonna get specular highlights. It's also possible to have a hard, diffused light source, right? We could have a small light source that's going through one layer of diffusion that kind of makes it a little bit diffused. So we get less reflection coming into the camera, even though the shadow to highlight transition is very sharp and very hard. So that's an important point of distinction that a lot of people mix up. I want you guys to get that. Okay, so now let's talk about a few other things that are going on. So one thing that I want you to see, a common term that you're gonna hear a lot, is a main light source, right? So this is our main light. Another common term is a fill light. So what we actually have to the left side is a V-flat from V-flat world. And what this is doing is it's set to the white side. In fact, if Mike comes around to this side, you're gonna see that the light is actually angled directly at me, and it's hitting the white area and bouncing back. And this creates fill. So all that means is we're filling the shadow. I actually wanna show you what that looks like, just so you can kind of see the difference between them, okay? So let's go ahead and just go back to our standard shoot through umbrella. So what is this gonna do? Okay, this is going to create a larger, diffused light source. I'll place it right about here. Let's bring it right up to Sammy. Okay, now let's take the same shot that we had. I'm gonna not adjust the power yet. Let's just take this shot real quick. Okay, that actually looks pretty solid right there in terms of overall light, right? So I can now control the fill with this V-flat. If I bring the V-flat closer, watch what happens. Exact same shot, nothing changed, no power settings changed. Look at the shadows on Sammy's face, right? So compared to that prior shot, we call this opening up of the shadows. So we essentially opened up or brightened the shadows a bit. I can make it more dramatic, right? So when you kind of fill the shadows, you make an image less dramatic. When you retain shadows, you make the image more dramatic. So what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna remove the V-flat. Okay, so now the black side is facing Sammy. Nothing's gonna happen. So we're gonna leave that shadow side dark, and what this does is it creates a more dramatic image. Okay, so now compare that shadow to the first image versus the second image with more fill. So this is what we call fill light. The cool thing is in a studio, we have complete control of this, right? But the same exact principles apply when you're outside. See, your main light, well, it often would be the sun, or you set up your own flash and maybe use the sun as a backlight, right? It's a light that's behind your subject. But the fill is all around you. Fill is coming from the sky, it's coming from the clouds, it's coming from other objects in the scene. So you still have control of those things, although, you know, in the studio, we're moving these things directly around. Usually when we're outside, we're gonna just move our subject around and kind of move the lights that we have control over, okay? So now you see this. Okay, so we know fill, we know the common terms that we're gonna kind of use. Let's talk now about light control. See, an umbrella like this, umbrellas are actually awesome modifiers, but they kind of they're honestly kind of unappreciated. And the reason why is because there's not a lot of light control, meaning when this light hits the umbrella, it bounces backwards, it goes up, it kind of goes everywhere in the scene. Now in a shot like this where I want a little bit of that light onto the backdrop, that's completely fine. But if you actually want control, an umbrella is not gonna give you that. So let's talk about an extreme level of control. So we're gonna go from the umbrella. Okay, let's just go bare. And let's show you this. So with this bare right now, I actually have a bit of control with just the zoom on the flash. Most flashes will have a zoom. So right now it's set to the widest setting. I can actually zoom this in, and what it's gonna do is kind of create a little cone shape as it pulls the light back and it's gonna fire the light forward, right? So let's create this shot using, what is this kind of light? It's a hard zoomed light source right now, right? So let's shoot the exact same image. This is probably gonna be a bit bright, but let's just look. Okay, super bright. We're gonna pull it down by 2 stops. Perfect, right there's about right. So when it's zoomed, I want you to look at where the light is spilling, okay? Spilling meaning hitting other areas of the image versus when it's wide. So right now we set it to the widest setting versus the zoom setting. Okay. So the difference there is subtle, but you can see the background actually get a little bit more of that light when it's zoomed versus when it's wide. We can take our light control up infinitely by adding another step, which is a grid. So when you hear people talking about grids, it's light control. And you'll notice that this little honeycomb shape is gonna funnel the light forward. How does it work? Well, it's essentially not allowing the light to go at angles. And if I turn this, so right now you could probably see my face right now, right? But if I turn this a little bit, you can see how it closes off that angle of light. So when we pop this right onto here, we now control the light and it doesn't spill anywhere onto our background. So watch. Okay, not only is it controlled, but you can see we also lost a little bit of light. So I'm actually gonna bring the power up a little bit. So whenever you use a grid, you are gonna lose a bit of light, but you're also gonna have that much more light control. So you can see how little of the background we're actually hitting with the grid on. Now you can kind of mix and match these things too, right? So if I have a grid on, and then I put the umbrella back on, I want you to start guessing what's gonna happen, right? So what's gonna happen now is that grid is gonna tighten up the light pattern. So we're only gonna fill out a small area of the umbrella, but that umbrella is still gonna diffuse the light. So essentially this is kind of like having a little bit more control over where the light's gonna spill while also diffusing the light. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it up by a couple stops because I know we're gonna lose quite a bit of light. Let's take that same shot again. Okay, so this is cool because you kind of have this in between now. The light transition from highlight to shadow is a little bit softer with the addition of the umbrella. But because the grid is in place, the light isn't spilling everywhere like it was when we just used the umbrella by itself. So we're kind of mixing and matching. Okay, so I want you to start putting this all together. See, with this knowledge, you can kind of guess what a light modifier is gonna do before ever wasting your money on something you might not use. When you look at an umbrella, and there's no kind of control over where the light's gonna spill, then you're gonna say, okay, the umbrella is gonna give me a soft light, but that light's gonna go everywhere. Let's say you look at a beauty dish. It's smaller than the umbrella, but it's gonna direct the light forward, right? You're gonna say that light source is gonna be a little bit harder of a light source because it's smaller, but it is gonna direct and funnel the light forward, so I'm gonna have a little bit more control over it. A beauty dish with a grid, even more control. Let's say you go to a softbox. Well, guess what? The shape of the modifier is gonna have a very small kind of nuanced effect to the overall image and light quality. A lot of times it's not even noticeable, meaning if you had a 3-foot softbox that was roughly the same size as this umbrella, realistically, the only way you'd be able to tell the difference is looking at, say, a catch light, looking at really close details. So there's a small bit of refinement there when it comes to, like, let's say the shape of a light modifier. But really what it comes down to is the modifier small or is it large? Is it a hard light source on the small side or is it a soft light source on the large side? Next, is it silver or is it white? Is it gonna be specular with that silver light or is it gonna be more diffused with white? Finally, what level of control do I have in controlling that light? Is there a grid or something else that will direct the light where I want it to? Or is it kind of an umbrella where that light's gonna bounce everywhere? Knowing this, you can look at any light modifier and know exactly what's gonna happen before you pull the trigger. I hope this helps. This is the video that I wished I had when I first started out, especially when I was buying all these different devices. Sammy, did you have fun doing this, sitting here?
Oh my God, I'm a blast, guys.
He's totally lying. But now he knows the difference between light modifiers. If you guys enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys back here, same time, same place next week. Peace.